Okay, man. Sorry if my voice is a little rough. I've been up all night, freaking doing social media bullshit. Been on a couple podcasts lately. Anti-SJW Ultra Degeneracy stream every Saturday night at 7. Been watching a lot of Empty Hero and shit. But anyway, couple of plugs. But I can't escape this shit. I actually have tried this Game of Thrones shit. See, I had read an article a couple days ago from some really shitty Daily Beast writer who was saying something about Game of Thrones is the show that has failed women or failed female characters. It's a show that features extremely prominent, extremely effective, and powerful female characters. And to just really condense that whole video that I ended up scrapping just down to a couple of sentences is really Game of Thrones, before they fucking ruined it for the last 2.5 seasons or so, was not really a show about macho shit. It wasn't really about war or battles or even dragons or magic or any of that shit. Game of Thrones was about, well, the Game of Thrones, otherwise known as political fucking espionage, which even in real life is an activity that women have generally excelled at. It's not actually a sex-biased program, or at least didn't used to be, and I don't really think finished up that way either. I think that was a completely off-base thing, but I recorded it drunk, I tried to shitpost about it, and it didn't really work, because it was a single-issue thing and it was stupid. But I found something worse. I found something much worse, folks. I found something that when I covered it on the podcast last night, I literally read like somebody took all the Szechuan sauce. I was like, Rah! It was fucking, I can't even do it because my throat's a little bit sore from talking all night. But what you're about to hear, I'm going to read this article to you in its entirety, and this may take a long time. A long, uncomfortable time, so buckle in. This is a Vox article. Vox is way worse than the Daily Beast, and the Daily Beast is cancer and fake news, so this is going to be brutal. And anybody, even if you're a person who still generally kind of liked the show by the end, will be mad about this because this is the wrongest, most nuclear hot take you have ever heard about the series finale, folks. Or at least the last 2 episodes, I should say, specifically. Spoilers, of fucking course. Not that I haven't been spoiling it without warning before, so anyway. This is about Daenerys burning King's Landing. And this particular author, this Vox writer's ridiculously fucking stellar hot take on this shit. It is, well, let's just jump into it. So this is Matthew Iglesias. Now, believe it or not, I honestly at first when I was reading this assumed that the writer was female because it is so hysterical and ridiculously white knightish. I don't even know if that's the correct term for it, that I didn't believe that a man could have fucked up this bad, but I've set this up enough. So, the title of this article is Daenerys Was Right, King's Landing Had to Burn. Westeros would have been better off with her on the Iron Throne. That's 2 declarative statements, both of which are objectively false and not up for discussion. King's Landing did not have to burn, that's why it was stupid. They did not set up the episode in any logical way that she needed to kill literally hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. Now, they could have set it up so that Daenerys had to kill and subsequently justify killing a large number of innocents. They didn't set it up that way. They set it up like she went batshit crazy. But, as you can see, Matthew Iglesias here strongly disagrees. Let's start reading. Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen was not a mad queen. And indeed, it's somewhat unclear how mad her supposedly insane father ever was. Time out before we even get halfway through the first sentence. Again, Luke Skywalker here. Everything you just said was wrong. I'm assuming this man hasn't read the books, nor has he watched the multiple episodes where people discuss the behavior of Mad King Aerys II, I believe it was. Sorry if I fucked that up. But Aerys was batshit insane. Now, some of the shit they didn't really go over in the show, or at least I don't remember, because not a lot has been discussed of him since, like, season 4, I believe. But, in the show, they do talk about how he was insisting to his Kingsguard that he had the intention of killing literally everybody in the city, or at the very least, everybody in the immediate vicinity of the castle, and had every intention of doing it. This is a guy who killed, I believe, 3 hands of the king. He, like, burned one of them to death, tortured the others. He thought just about everyone around him was a traitor. He was absolutely fucking crazy paranoid, and he was always insane. But he got a little bit less insane, and in the books they described that there was a specific incident where he had a son, and he had been trying to have a son for a long time. He was trying to get an heir, and his son died from some infant illness. And in the setting of Game of Thrones, infants and young children die all the fucking time. There's a very high infant mortality rate because this is medieval times with very limited medicine. Their idea of treating people is generally to get them high on heroin. So, milk of the poppy, if you will. So, his son dies, and he assumes that his son was murdered. So he has first his son's wet nurse killed, then he has his son's wet nurse entire family killed, and then he has, like, the cook killed, and he basically kills half the fucking staff of the castle, and he has them all tortured to death. Now, when you're being tortured to death, generally you might say anything to make the torture stop. So he actually had these people tortured so miserably badly that most of them confessed. But when asked the details of their crime of killing the king's heir, they all gave wildly different results because they were willing to say anything to make the torture stop. This man was very, 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 very insane. And if you'll remember from the show, Jaime ended up telling Brienne of Tarth when she tried to shame him for being the Kingslayer, like, he basically said Aerys was fucking mad and would have had me kill literally fucking everybody. And I would have had to obey him. And he's like, would you have obeyed him if he said he wanted to kill babies, infants, women, children, innocent, guilty men? Didn't matter. He wanted to kill fucking everybody. He was absolutely insane. And he considered it more his duty to kill the king than to obey him in this case. That's how crazy this supposedly unclear how insane is King Aerys. Okay, this is ridiculous. And that's, of course, I don't want to go too far into it, but that's another reason how they ruined Jaime. When they said, oh, Jaime's like, I'm hateful, I only care about my sister, who my entire character arc was separating me away from her, and I have to die in her arms because the writers are fucking idiots. He had explained in a lot of his arc that he actually had a conscience, and that he actually was aware of how bad of a person he was and had a sense of shame. So the fact that they stripped that away from him was fucked up. But as you can see, 7 minutes into this video, a single sentence into this article, we're going to be here a while. Jon Snow was wrong to stab Daenerys to death in the series finale, and the new elective monarchy set up by a hastily assembled Great Council of the Lords of Westeros represents a step back in terms of political development. Now, the Great Council was fucking ridiculous and wouldn't have logically happened either, but if there was one logical decision made in the last 2 episodes, it was recognizing that Daenerys was batshit insane and that she would basically be the next Pol Pot. Because she was still trying to claim, oh, I'm here to break the yoke, I'm here to free everybody from tyrants, but she had just demonstrated that just because she feels like it, she was willing to burn hundreds of thousands of small folk civilians to death, and would almost certainly do that. And she named her own allies in her list of potential targets in her great big speech. She named Winterfell. She named Dorne. She named all of Essos. I mean, she was going to kill millions. So no, Jon Snow did the right thing for once. Her death was a tragedy that reflects on some level the very same Stark family naivete about politics that was such a heavy point of emphasis in the beginning of the series. The first thing they say right, the main character arc of most of the Stark characters was that they were naive and that their principles hamstrung them and handicapped them in the game. The honor and duty-bound nature of Ned Stark got him killed. The honor and generosity and belief that he could do the right thing and could change the fate of the realm is what got Jon Snow killed. Sansa having trust that she could just, be a pretty lady and not have to deal with any bullshit, being the future queen. She was wrong. I mean, this was generally an arc for even, I think, Arya, in having to grow up and realizing that the world is ugly and murderous and evil, and that you have to play dirty and rough. So that's one thing they say is true. And despite the Starks' seemingly good-natured instincts on a personal level, their approach to leadership is going to accomplish nothing useful for the long-suffering, ordinary people of Westeros. Jon Snow saved thousands, if not millions, of people with his direct actions. If Jon Snow didn't exist, even in this fucked up universe, many, 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 many more people would have died. If Ned Stark had never discovered what was going on, there would have been Queen Cersei and Queen Joffrey and everybody who did something. What they did mattered and was ultimately, in the grand scheme of things that needed to happen for the realm to be better off. Even again with the shitty writing, generally this was a positive ending. Overall, if you're considering the realm, if you're considering the characters and our enjoyment as an audience, it was garbage. But if you're considering the good of the realm, it was more or less served. But you're going to see where this dumbass is going with this. Some form of actual democratic governance, as proposed by Grand Maester Samwell Tarly, would have been an enormous step forward. There's a reason why that really flat, stupid, cringy fan service joke, it was a joke. It was a meta, fourth wall breaking joke for the benefit of the audience, that Samwell Tarly says, oh, hey, how about democracy or representative democracy? Wouldn't that be grand? Consider our setting. This is hierarchical, patriarchal, hereditary, monarchy-based, even down to the individual kingdoms, lordships, protectorates, whatever. It's all a fiefdom. It's all an inherited fiefdom. It's medieval. It is primitive, by design, to expect this world to shift immediately from millennia of fiefdom into straight-up modern IRL, in real life, democratic processes with voting and shit and rights. You're fucking retarded. That was just a joke. It was a joke, folks. And it's not just a joke as in it was meant to make you laugh, the audience, fourth wall breaking bullshit, cringy, bad writing. It was also a joke in that it was ludicrous. You understand? This is not a reasonable expectation. I hope I'm making sense to folks here. But it was laughed out of bounds by the High Lords of the Seven Kingdoms, who proceeded to set up a form of government that serves their narrow interests while doing nothing to address the many serious problems afflicting the continent. Well, it's actually a great big step forward that even though they refused to form a democracy, they did form a kind of representative electorate, that they would elect kings, at least among the lordships. This is progress. Positive progress, technically. Therefore, and also, it would almost certainly be better off for the continent that there was a more of a council-focused governance, and that the leader would be somebody that at least a majority of the council would have faith in, rather than just the next heir. This is actually significant progress, and you ignoring that, Matthew, makes you retarded. Let's continue. Daenerys isn't crazy. This is in bold-faced large type. Yes, she is. And this is not something that is up for debate. This is not subjective inference. This is an objective fact. Daenerys went crazy. Because if genociding civilians, and not just genociding civilians, but genociding civilians, this is a very important point that we're going to have to contest repeatedly, for no reason. There can be a reason to target civilians. It happens way more often than anyone wants to admit in warfare, even up to the modern day. But there has to be a tactical reason. There was none. We're not done with this point by a long shot. Daenerys isn't crazy. The underlying presumption of the actions undertaken by Varys, Tyrion, and Jon over the course of the Game of Thrones final few episodes is that Daenerys is in some sense unstable. This was made deliberately and abundantly clear by the writers of the show, not just in the script, making it plainly fucking obvious that she is at least unstable. It's also stated very clearly in interviews given by the writers. It was deliberately, purposefully, and in some sense very poorly, but clearly represented in the show. To try to argue that Daenerys was not unstable means you're fucking unstable, Matthew, but let's continue. As reflected by her willingness to harm the civilian population of King's Landing. She's unstable for that reason and many more reasons. That's not the only reason. But we might not get to those. We're at least trying to constrain ourselves somewhat. This video may be very long. This simply isn't true, says Matthew. Daenerys has an objective, to induce the lords of Westeros to bend the knee and acknowledge her supremacy. They already have. The only one who hadn't at that point, with maybe the exception of Dorne, although I believe Dorne was the first ally with her, by the way. We just hadn't seen a lot of Dorne lately, but I think only Highgarden, maybe, they kind of were eliminated from the show in season 6, and King's Landing were the only people who had not bent the knee. She did not need to demonstrate those people. They already bent the knee. So you're wrong. Objectively, it's actually not up for debate. It is a fact that Matthew is wrong. Daenerys had an objective to induce the Lords of Westeros to bend the knee and acknowledge her supremacy, and her attack on King's Landing in the episode The Bells was well calibrated to achieve that objective. This is also an objectively false statement. This is not up for debate. There was no reason for her to do that. And in fact, if there was any reason why the continent of Westeros, which was already under her control by this point, would have choice to renege on their decision to follow and support her and do her bidding, was her showing her willingness to wantonly kill hundreds of thousands of people that she neither needed to, nor should have wanted to, nor had any feasible, even propagandistic or image-related reasons for doing so. We're not done. She had previously offered Queen Cersei the opportunity to surrender, and Cersei had refused, and she packed the city with civilians and ringing it with air defenses that pose a lethal threat to Drogon, Daenerys' one remaining dragon. This is a retarded and stupid statement, folks. King's Landing is not a military fort. Maegor's Holdfast and the Red Keep are a combined military installation. Those are the castle. King's Landing is not a castle. King's Landing is a city with a purported 1 million civilian small folk population. The civilians are not, how should you say, packed in or moved in. They live there, and they are not a military objective, nor are they combatants. They're not even potential combatants. This is false. A combination of skilled piloting and poor marksmanship allowed Daenerys to overcome the city's air defenses, destroy the Golden Company, and induce the Lannisters to attempt to surrender. By the way, it was just the army itself betraying, essentially, Queen Cersei, who did not give the order to surrender. The army did what Daenerys presumably wanted them to do, which was deny Cersei's orders, symbolically denying her supremacy and leadership, and surrender. And the reason why they did this is because if they did not, they would all die, and there probably would have been extensive civilian casualties, even if Daenerys did her best to only target military targets. None of this happened in the show. If Daenerys had simply allowed King's Landing to surrender without consequences only after she evaded its air defenses, then every other recalcitrant lord in the Seven Kingdoms would have had incentive to resist her. No, they would not. She'd already either defeated or negotiated with and had all the remaining lords allied to Cersei bend the knee. I think there's possibly only, maybe, Castle Rock, Highgarden, and the waters around Blackwater Bay in King's Landing that were even presumably not on her side. Neither of them had engaged her in combat except for the Lannisters, which were effectively just the army of King's Landing, if only because Cersei was effectively the lord of both Casterly Rock, I can't ever fucking say that word, and King's Landing, you understand? So she still only had one foe. Everyone else had already bent the knee. So no, this is objectively false. It's not up for debate. You are wrong. Factually wrong. After all, it only takes a lucky shot or two to bring down the dragon. It should not be this way, but apparently it is. And the queen riding him. If she manages to burn your scorpions, you can always just surrender. I don't even know why you added this statement. It doesn't mean anything. The breaker of chains can be legitimately faulted for not explaining the strategic logic of her actions. He means killing the civilians, by the way. So let me repeat this sentence. The breaker of chains. The reason why she's called this is because she frees civilians from tyrants. She doesn't act like a tyrant and butcher them senselessly. So the fact that you would not only say something that is objectively false, but have the gall to use a different pronoun title for Daenerys, the breaker of chains, in this sentence is madness. The breaker of chains can be legitimately faulted for not explaining the strategic logic of her actions to key subordinates before the battle began. But in her defense, those same key subordinates had spent the previous days spreading treasonous talk about Jon Snow being the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, so she can perhaps be forgiven for not fully taking them into her confidence. This is all absolutely fucking retarded. Jon Snow, the only person that she had any reason to be afraid of, was the one person who had sworn complete fealty to her. The tension that they tried to demonstrate some sort of tension between Sansa and Daenerys, and all they demonstrated was plain tension. They in no way demonstrated any kind of seditious intent on Sansa's part. Sansa never said or did anything seditious. Jon Snow never said or did anything seditious. Tyrion never said or did anything seditious. Only Varys said or did anything seditious. And it was only after Varys was proven right that anyone followed in his footsteps. Now, of course, Matthew Iglesias, our author here, thinks all of them, Tyrion, Varys, Jon, Sansa, were wrong about Daenerys, when the fact of the matter is that they were all right. But let's continue. Here is the worst couple of sentences in this entire article. Making an example of King's Landing was a harsh decision. It was a cruel decision. And it's certainly a decision whose morality could be questioned. Matthew. Indiscriminately, without reason, killing 1 million people is a clear violation of any moral, ethical code one could possibly think of. There was no reason. Not no good reason. There was literally no reason for her to do this. It was entirely unnecessary. Keep in mind that the civilians are all on the ground, and Daenerys can fly. She can go straight to the castle and just burn the castle, which presumably would have killed some, maybe a few hundred innocents. It would not kill 1 million. She had no reason to do this other than savage. I don't even think she really did it out of anger. I think she literally was batshit fucking insane. And she didn't have a good reason to be batshit fucking insane either. This entire season was botched. Her entire arc was irrevocably fucked. But we should continue. Making an example of King's Landing was a harsh decision, and it's one that whose morality could be questioned, but it wasn't a crazy decision. I repeat, Matthew says it wasn't a crazy decision or the act of a mad queen. Yes, it was. It was a rational calculation based on a clear-eyed assessment of the strategic situation. Boy, you are fucking wrong, dude. No, it's not even up for debate, okay? There was no strategic or even propagandistic reason to butcher the civilian populace. It was a decision that led her own boyfriend to murder her in his arms because there was no reason. It wasn't even logically following from grief or anger. In fact, the attempt that the show made to justify this action was the lines in a previous episode where she said, if everyone knows you're the rightful heir, nobody will ever love me. I don't even think anybody will ever love me anyways. I want to rule by love, and if I can't rule by love, I will rule by fear. And her tactical decision, since she was already insane by this point, to kill 1 million people was to strike fear, not just in the hearts of the slavers, the people with chains, the tyrants, the lords of the realm. She did it to strike fear in the people she claims to love. She did it to strike fear in the populace so that they would always be more afraid of her than the people who already terrorized them. This is the logic of an insane person. Do you understand? I don't think you do, Matthew. I think you're too fucking stupid to grasp these not particularly big-brained concepts. These are pretty fucking simple, logical conclusions. Her reasoning, the writer's justification for the character's reasoning, was to strike fear in the people she claimed to love and want to be loved by. And her way of striking fear into the people she wanted to love and be loved by was to butcher them by the hundreds of thousands, not just men, but the women and the children. This is basically the arc of Darth Vader, folks. But no, this was actually a strategic good guy decision, and everybody else in the show was wrong. Almost all of the fans of this show were wrong. Only Matthew and Daenerys knows what's right. And you wonder why I call progressives evil, folks. This shit right here. Let's continue. Fuck, I don't even know if we're half done. This might be the longest video I've ever done. I'm very sorry, folks. In fact, I think I'm going to pause this right here. And shortly after you see this come up in your feed, there will almost certainly be right behind it a part 2. I think I might do 2 30-minute parts of this. The next one might actually be shorter, but, you know, in the interest of breaking this up, this is already way longer. I try to keep my shit 10, 15. Sometimes I do 20. 30 is rarity. I'm not going to go 1 hour. It'll take me a million years to upload it anyways. So we're going to pause here. Meet me back very soon. There will be a part 2 to this, folks. We will get over how this guy wants to judge how bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, good and moral Daenerys totally had a great, strategic, rational, and righteous reason to butcher hundreds of thousands of innocent people. And we're going to find out how further he's going to elucidate this point coming up next.